The first thing my husband asked for in divorce court was not forgiveness. It wasn't an explanation. It wasn't even a goodbye. It was everything I owned. Your Honor, my client is requesting full rights to the marital assets, including the properties, investment accounts, and any financial gains accumulated during the marriage. The courtroom went silent. I sat across from Daniel Carter, watching the man I had loved for 10 years calmly ask a judge to take away my entire life. The same man who once held my hand in a cheap apartment and promised me we would build a future together. The same man who cried on my shoulder when his first company failed. The same man who told me I was the only person who believed in him. Now, he looked at me like I was a stranger. No, not even a stranger. A problem he wanted removed. Emily, Daniel's attorney continued. Your husband built Carter Innovations from the ground up. His success is the result of his hard work. My client believes he deserves a fair portion of the wealth created during the marriage. I almost laughed. Almost. Because everyone in that courtroom believed the same story. Daniel Carter was a self-made billionaire. The genius entrepreneur who turned a small technology startup into a global empire. The man who appeared on magazine covers. The man investors called a visionary. And me. I was just Emily Carter. His quiet wife. The woman who stayed home. The woman who smiled beside him at charity events. The woman everyone assumed was lucky to have him. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Confident. He knew exactly how this looked. He knew the world would believe him. After all, why would anyone question the powerful CEO sitting in an expensive suit? Especially when the woman across from him looked like someone who had already accepted defeat. But Daniel had made one mistake. He thought he knew who I was. He didn't. Not anymore. Mrs. Carter, the judge said, looking at me. Do you dispute the claims made by your husband's legal team? Every eye turned toward me. Reporters sitting in the back raised their cameras. Daniel's new girlfriend, Olivia, sat beside his family with a satisfied smile. She looked at me like she had already won. Like she was already planning her future as Mrs. Daniel Carter. I slowly lifted my head. No, Your Honor. A small murmur spread through the courtroom. Daniel's lips curved slightly. He thought I had surrendered. His attorney smiled. Even Olivia looked amused. But the judge frowned. Mrs. Carter, are you saying you agree with their request? I looked directly at Daniel. The man who had once promised me forever. The man who had forgotten every sacrifice I made. The man who believed my silence meant weakness. Then I smiled. No. I'm saying I have no reason to argue. Daniel's expression changed slightly. Just for a second. Because he knew me. Or at least, he used to. He knew I never gave up easily. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Emily. I didn't answer. Because the truth was something Daniel wasn't ready to hear. For 10 years. I had hidden something from him. Not because I was ashamed. Not because I was afraid. But because I wanted to know one thing. If I had nothing, if I wasn't the daughter of the Carter family, if I wasn't the woman controlling billions of dollars in investments, would Daniel Carter still choose me? For 10 years. I watched. I watched him love me when he needed me. I watched him depend on me when he was struggling. I watched him change when success finally arrived. And today, standing in this courtroom, I finally had my answer. He didn't love me. He loved the version of himself he became because I was standing behind him. Your Honor. Daniel suddenly spoke. I believe this marriage ended because Emily and I simply grew apart. Grew apart. Such a beautiful phrase. A phrase people used when they wanted to hide ugly truths. He didn't mention the late nights he spent with Olivia. He didn't mention the secret hotel bills. He didn't mention the conversations I accidentally saw on his phone. He just sat there pretending this was a sad ending between two adults. Not a betrayal. Not a replacement. Not a man trying to erase the woman who helped build his empire. Daniel. I finally said. He looked at me. What? I stared at him calmly. Do you remember the night you almost lost everything? His face changed. A tiny crack appeared in his confident expression. Because he remembered. Of course he remembered. 10 years ago. Before the world knew his name, before investors lined up outside his office, before he owned penthouses and private jets, there was only a broken man sitting on a dirty apartment floor. And there was me. The woman who saved him. But he didn't know the biggest irony. The company he thought he built alone, the empire he believed proved his greatness, the billions everyone admired, it was standing on a foundation he never knew existed. A foundation I quietly created. The judge shuffled through the documents in front of him. Then suddenly, he stopped. His eyebrows tightened. He looked confused. Then surprised. Then something else. Something I hadn't seen on anyone's face in years. Shock. Mrs. Carter. The judge said slowly. The entire courtroom became silent. There appears to be additional information regarding your financial records. Daniel smiled. I'm sure it's nothing important. The judge ignored him. He continued reading. Actually, he looked up. This information changes everything. For the first time that day, Daniel looked nervous. What information? The judge closed the folder. And the next words that came out of his mouth changed Daniel Carter's entire world. Mrs. Emily Carter is not the financial dependent party in this marriage. A pause. Then, she is the primary beneficiary of the Carter Capital Trust. Daniel froze. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge looked directly at him. And according to these records, she has personal assets valued at over $1 billion. Daniel's smile disappeared. Olivia stopped breathing. His attorney dropped the pen in his hand. And my husband, the man who came here to take everything from me, finally realized something. He had never known his wife at all. Daniel stared at the judge as if he had misheard. For several seconds. He didn't move. The confident expression he had worn since walking into the courtroom disappeared completely. I'm sorry, Daniel finally said. His voice slightly uneven. Did you just say $1 billion? The judge looked at him calmly. Yes, Mr. Carter. The entire courtroom was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from before. This was different. This was the kind of silence that came when everyone realized they had been watching the wrong story. For the past hour, Daniel had painted himself as the victim, the hardworking husband, the successful businessman who was forced to separate from his ordinary wife. But now, everyone was looking at me differently. The woman sitting quietly in the corner. The woman who had said almost nothing. The woman Daniel believed he could easily defeat. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know who I really was. Olivia was the first person to break. That's impossible. Her voice was quiet at first. Then louder. Emily Carter. She's not. She stopped herself. Because she realized everyone was looking at her. The judge raised an eyebrow. Not what? Ms. Bennett. Olivia's face turned pale. She quickly lowered her eyes. She couldn't say it. She couldn't say what she had always believed. That I was ordinary. That I was lucky. That I was only standing beside Daniel because he had given me a better life. But the truth was the opposite. Daniel had been standing beside me. He just never knew it. My husband slowly turned toward me. For the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Fear. Emily, he said my name like he was trying to recognize me. Like he was looking at a stranger wearing the face of his wife. You knew. I didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was complicated. Yes. I knew. I knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly what I owned. I knew exactly what power I had. But Daniel never knew. And that was because of a decision I made 10 years ago. A decision I once believed was romantic. A decision I now understood had only protected the wrong person. 10 years earlier, I met Daniel Carter in a coffee shop in downtown Manhattan. He was sitting in the corner with a laptop that looked older than he was. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. His hair was messy. And he looked exhausted. Most people would have ignored him. But I noticed the way he looked at his business plan. Not like someone staring at a document. Like someone staring at a dream. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He wasn't powerful. He was just a man who believed he could change the world. And somehow, that was what attracted me. At that time, nobody knew my family name. Nobody knew that my father had built one of the largest private investment networks in America. Nobody knew that after his death, I became the sole heir to Carter Capital Trust. A fortune that most people could never imagine. But I didn't want someone to love me because of my last name. I wanted someone to love Emily. Just Emily. Not the billionaire heiress. Not the woman with billions behind her. Just the woman who liked morning coffee and old movies. So when Daniel asked me out, I never told him. When we got married, I still never told him. And when his company almost collapsed 2 years later, I secretly helped him. Not with my name. Not publicly. I created an anonymous investment fund. A fund that saved his company from bankruptcy. Daniel called that investor his guardian angel. He often joked that he wished he could meet the person who believed in him when nobody else did. I always smiled. Because I was sitting right beside him. But then success changed everything. At first, it was small. He started coming home later. He started caring more about appearances. He started correcting the way I dressed, the way I spoke, the people I spent time with. Then came the sentence I would never forget. "You're a wonderful woman, Emily." He said it while looking at a business magazine featuring him on the cover. "But sometimes I think you don't understand my world anymore." My world. Those words stayed with me. Because I suddenly realized something. Daniel thought he had entered a world I couldn't understand. He never knew I was the one who built the door. Back in the courtroom, Daniel was still staring at me. "Why?" he whispered. I looked at him. "Why what? Why didn't you tell me?" I almost smiled. Because that question was the reason we were here. Not money. Not assets. Not divorce papers. The truth. "You never asked who I was." Daniel frowned. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" My voice remained calm. "You spent 10 years telling everyone who you were. You talked about your achievements, your company, your success. But you never once wondered about mine." The words hit harder than I expected. Because Daniel had no answer. His attorney quickly stood. "Your Honor, we need time to review these documents." The judge nodded. "I believe that is necessary." He looked at both sides. "Given the new financial information presented today, this court will postpone the asset division hearing." The gavel came down. Everyone began moving. Reporters rushed toward the exit. Lawyers whispered. People who had ignored me moments ago suddenly wanted my attention. But I didn't move. I simply gathered my documents. Daniel watched me. He looked lost. Almost like the past 10 years had collapsed in front of him. "Emily." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "Are you really worth $1 billion? For a moment, I closed my eyes. Because that was what he cared about. Not whether I was hurt. Not whether he had betrayed me. Not whether he destroyed our marriage. Only the number. I finally looked back. Yes. A pause. "And that's exactly why you still don't understand." Daniel's expression froze. I walked away, leaving behind the man who came to court expecting to take everything from me. And leaving him with the only thing he truly deserved. The truth. The news spread faster than I expected. By the time I left the courthouse, my name was already appearing on financial websites. Not because I wanted attention. Not because I had planned some dramatic reveal. But because Daniel Carter's divorce had suddenly become the biggest financial story in Manhattan. Carter Innovations CEO faces shocking divorce twist. Hidden billionaire heiress revealed in court. The woman behind the empire. I sat in the back seat of my car, watching the headlines appear one after another on my phone. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel happy. I just felt tired. Because the truth was finally out. But the person I wanted to understand it the most was the person who never tried to. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was my attorney, Rachel Morgan. "Emily, are you okay?" I looked out the window at the city passing by. "I'm fine." Rachel was silent for a moment. She knew me too well. "You don't sound fine." I smiled faintly. "Rachel, I spent 10 years hiding who I was." "Yes. And today, I spent 1 hour watching the person I loved realize he never knew me." She sighed. "Daniel made his choice." "I know. No. Emily. I don't think you do." Her voice became serious. "You still care about him." I didn't answer. Because she was right. That was the part one hated admitting. I wasn't angry because Daniel wanted money. I wasn't even angry because he betrayed me. I was hurt because there was a time when I truly believed he loved me. Before the company. Before the fame. Before the interviews. Before Olivia. Before he started looking at me like I was someone who didn't belong beside him. 3 weeks earlier. Before the divorce papers. Before the courtroom. Before the world learned my secret. I was still Daniel Carter's wife. At least, that was what I thought. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. I had prepared dinner. It was something I rarely did anymore because Daniel was always busy. But it was our 10th wedding anniversary. I wanted to surprise him. I even bought the wine we drank on our first date. A small tradition. Something only we remembered. When I opened the door, I heard voices from the living room. Daniel wasn't alone. I stopped. Because I recognized the other voice. Olivia Bennett. His executive assistant. At first, I thought maybe they were discussing work. That was the excuse I gave myself. The excuse people give when they don't want to believe what is happening. Then I heard Olivia laugh. "Daniel. You know everyone already thinks we're together." My hand tightened around the wine bottle. There was a pause. Then Daniel answered. Olivia, his voice wasn't angry. That hurt more than anything. Because if he had been angry, if he had pushed her away, I could have convinced myself there was a misunderstanding. But he didn't. I just need time, he said. Time. A simple word. A word that destroyed everything. Olivia lowered her voice. What about Emily? Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Then Daniel said, Emily and I haven't been the same for a long time. I stood there completely still. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar. The walls. The furniture. The memories. Everything. Then he continued. She doesn't understand my life anymore. My life. Again. That phrase. I had heard it before. But hearing it from him this time felt different. Because I finally understood. Daniel wasn't saying I didn't understand his life. He was saying he had forgotten mine. I didn't confront him that night. People always imagine betrayal comes with screaming, arguments, broken plates, tears. But sometimes the most painful moments are quiet. I placed the wine bottle on the kitchen counter. I walked upstairs. And I packed a small suitcase. Daniel didn't notice. Not when I left. Not when I stayed at a hotel. Not when I spent 3 nights alone wondering where our marriage had disappeared. 2 days later. He sent me divorce papers. Not a conversation. Not an apology. Legal documents. His lawyer's assistant delivered them with a polite smile. Mr. Carter hopes this can be handled peacefully. Peacefully. That word almost made me laugh. There was nothing peaceful about someone trying to erase 10 years of your life. Back in the present. I entered my apartment. Not the mansion Daniel and I shared. My own apartment. The one I purchased years before I met him. The one he never knew existed. It was strange. For 10 years. I lived in the home Daniel believed he provided. Meanwhile, I owned properties across 3 states. I owned investment portfolios. I owned companies. But I never cared about any of that. Because I thought I had something more valuable. A marriage. A family. A person who chose me. My assistant, Claire, was waiting inside. She stood when she saw me. Ms. Carter. I smiled. You don't have to call me that. She hesitated. Then smiled back. I think after today. Everyone is going to. I placed my bag down. Claire. Yes. Cancel every interview request. She looked surprised. But the media, I don't care about the media. I walked toward the window. The city lights reflected against the glass. I don't want the world to know how much money I have. Claire nodded. Then what do you want them to know? I was quiet for a moment. Then I answered that I existed. Because for 10 years, I had been standing beside Daniel Carter. Everyone saw him. Everyone celebrated him. Everyone remembered his name. Nobody ever asked about mine. The next morning, Daniel came to my apartment. I knew he would. People like Daniel always came back when they realized they had lost control. When I opened the door, he looked different. Not like the confident CEO from court. Not like the man who believed he had already won. He looked exhausted. Emily. I didn't invite him in. What do you want? He swallowed. I need to talk. We talked in court. No. His voice lowered. That wasn't a conversation. I looked at him. That was the first time you actually listened. His face tightened. I didn't know. I almost smiled. You didn't ask. That's not fair. Daniel. I interrupted him. For 10 years. I asked you about your dreams. I supported your company. I celebrated your achievements. When did you ever ask about mine? He opened his mouth. But nothing came out. Because he couldn't answer. Not honestly. Finally. He whispered, were you ever going to tell me? I looked at him. The man I once wanted to grow old with. The man who now stood outside my door like a stranger. I was waiting for you to love Emily. I paused. Not the woman behind the money. His eyes changed. And for the first time, Daniel Carter understood. The secret I hid wasn't about wealth. It was about love. And he had spent 10 years proving he never deserved to know it. Daniel stood outside my apartment door for a long time. Long enough that I could see the uncertainty on his face. It was strange. For 10 years. I had seen Daniel face investors, competitors, and business rivals without hesitation. He could stand on a stage in front of thousands of people and speak with absolute confidence. He could negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking. He could convince anyone that he was the smartest person in the room. But now, standing in front of me, he looked lost. Like a man who had just discovered the person he thought he knew never existed. Emily. He finally said. His voice was softer than usual. I made mistakes. I looked at him quietly. Those words. They sounded so simple. Too simple. A decade of marriage. 10 years of memories. 1,000 moments where I chose him over myself. And now he summarized everything with 3 words. I made mistakes. I stepped back slightly. Daniel. Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary. Mistakes are missing dinner because of work. Mistakes are saying something careless during an argument. My voice remained calm. What you did wasn't a mistake. His expression changed. It was a choice. The hallway became silent. Daniel looked away. For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. Because he knew I was right. When Daniel and I first met, he wasn't the man everyone knew today. He didn't have a luxury office. He didn't own a penthouse overlooking Manhattan. He didn't have assistants following him everywhere. He was just Daniel. A young man with a dream bigger than his bank account. I still remembered our first conversation. It was raining that night. I was sitting alone in a small coffee shop near Columbia University. Daniel walked in carrying a stack of papers. He accidentally bumped into my table. Coffee spilled everywhere. I'm sorry, he said immediately. He looked embarrassed. I swear I'm usually more coordinated than this. I laughed. And that was how we met. Not at a business conference. Not at a wealthy family event. Not because our backgrounds matched. Just because of a cup of coffee. Back then, he didn't know my last name carried weight. He didn't know my family owned investment firms. He didn't know my future inheritance was worth more than he could imagine. He only knew me as Emily. A girl who liked books. A girl who hated fancy restaurants. A girl who preferred walking through the city instead of being driven around. And I loved that. Because with him, I felt normal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't treated like a responsibility. I wasn't introduced as William Carter's daughter. I wasn't judged by my family's wealth. I was just Emily. After Daniel left that night, I sat alone in my apartment. The same apartment I had bought before our marriage. The same place where I kept pieces of my old life. A photo sat on the shelf. It was from 10 years ago. Daniel and I were standing outside the courthouse after getting married. He was wearing a simple suit. I was wearing a plain white dress. Nothing expensive. Nothing extravagant. But we were smiling. The kind of smile people have when they believe they have found forever. I picked up the photo. And for a moment, I wondered when everything changed. Was it the first time he appeared on a magazine cover? Was it the first time investors called him a genius? Was it when strangers started telling him he deserved someone better? Or was it when he started believing them? The next morning, Rachel arrived at my office. Unlike most people, Rachel wasn't surprised by my identity. She had known the truth from the beginning. She placed a folder on my desk. The financial review is complete. I looked at the documents. Anne, she sighed. Daniel's team has been moving assets. I wasn't surprised. Before the divorce. Yes. Rachel pushed another document toward me. These transfers started 6 months ago. 6 months. I looked at the date. The exact time Daniel had started spending more time with Olivia. The exact time he began coming home less. The exact time he started telling me he was under pressure. I closed the folder. So he wasn't just leaving. Rachel nodded. He was preparing. That word hurt. Preparing. While I was still trying to save our marriage, he was preparing to destroy it. Emily. Rachel said carefully. There is something else. I looked up. What? She hesitated. The court will likely reopen the entire asset division. I know. No. You don't. She leaned forward. Daniel thinks the billion-dollar trust is the biggest surprise. I frowned. What do you mean? Rachel opened another file. Inside was a list of companies. Companies I owned. Companies I had invested in years ago. Companies that had grown quietly while the world focused on Daniel. Your father didn't just leave you money, Rachel said. He left you influence. I remained silent. Because I knew exactly what she meant. My family name had power. My investments had power. But I had spent years avoiding that power. I wanted a simple life. I wanted a husband who loved me. I wanted a home where I wasn't introduced as someone important. But now, I realized something. I had spent years hiding my identity to protect my marriage. Daniel spent years ignoring my identity to protect his ego. That afternoon, I received a message. From Daniel. Can we meet? Just once. I stared at the screen. A part of me wanted to ignore him. A part of me wanted to move forward. But another part of me, the part that remembered the young man in the coffee shop, wanted answers. So I agreed. We met at the restaurant where we celebrated our first anniversary. The same place where Daniel once told me one day, "I'll give you everything you deserve." Funny. Years later, he was the one trying to take everything away. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early. That alone surprised me. He had never been early for anything. Not meetings. Not dinners. Not anniversaries. He stood when he saw me. "Emily." I sat across from him. "What do you want to say?" He looked nervous. "I talked to my lawyers. Anne." He took a breath. "They said the situation is complicated." I almost laughed. Complicated. That was the word wealthy people used when reality stopped favoring them. "Daniel." I looked directly at him. "Say what you actually came here to say." He was silent. "Then, did you ever love me?" The question surprised me. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because he was asking it now. After everything. I looked at the man across from me. "Yes." His eyes softened. Then I continued, "But I don't know if you ever loved me." His expression froze. "I did." "Did you?" "Yes." "Then why did you spend 10 years trying to become someone I couldn't stand beside?" Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because deep down, he knew. The problem wasn't that I had hidden billions. The problem was that he had stopped seeing me long before he knew about them. Before we left, Daniel said one final thing. "Emily, if I had known who you were," I stopped walking. Then I turned around. "That's exactly the problem." "Daniel." He looked at me. "You only care now because you know." I walked away, leaving him sitting alone at the table. The same table where we once planned our future. Only this time, there was no future left to save. And Daniel Carter finally understood the woman he underestimated for 10 years was the only person who ever truly believed in him. The morning after I met Daniel, I woke up earlier than usual. For years, I had been the kind of person who opened my eyes and immediately thought about him. Did he have an important meeting today? Did he remember to eat breakfast? Was the pressure of running a company too much for him? That was how I lived. Not because I had to. Because I loved him. But that morning, when sunlight entered through the windows of my apartment, the first thought that crossed my mind was different. I am finally free. Not free from Daniel. Free from the version of myself I had become because of him. For 10 years, I had tried to make myself smaller. I avoided expensive clothes. I refused luxury cars. I turned down invitations to exclusive events. Whenever someone introduced me as Emily Carter, I would quickly add, "Just Emily." I thought love meant meeting someone halfway. I thought marriage meant building a life together. But I never realized that while I was lowering myself to stand beside Daniel, he was climbing higher and higher because I was holding him up. 3 days later, the second divorce hearing began. This time, the courtroom was completely different. The first day, people looked at me with sympathy. They saw Daniel Carter, the powerful CEO. And they saw me, the quiet wife. They assumed I was the one losing everything. Now, everyone looked curious. Reporters filled the back rows. Financial analysts were there. People wanted to know one thing: who was Emily Carter? Daniel walked in wearing a dark navy suit. He looked composed. Almost normal. If someone saw him from a distance, they would never know his world had been shaken. But I noticed the difference. His confidence was gone. Before, he walked like he owned the room. Now, he walked like he was trying to prove he still belonged in it. Olivia followed behind him, but she wasn't smiling anymore. The woman who once sat beside him proudly now stayed several steps behind. She avoided looking at me. Because she knew. Everyone knew. The balance had changed. "Your Honor," Daniel's attorney began, after reviewing the newly revealed financial information, "we would like to request a complete reassessment of all assets." The judge nodded. "That is appropriate." Daniel glanced at me. I could see the question in his eyes. Why wasn't I angry? Why wasn't I celebrating? Why wasn't I humiliating him the way he had humiliated me? Because that was never what I wanted. I didn't want Daniel destroyed. I wanted him to understand. There was a difference. A person who truly loved someone wouldn't need to see them fall to realize their worth. The judge looked through the documents. According to the records submitted by Carter Capital Trust, Daniel's attorney shifted uncomfortably. The judge continued. "Mrs. Emily Carter has maintained independent financial assets throughout the marriage." Independent. That word mattered. Because Daniel had spent weeks telling people I depended on him. The judge turned another page. "Furthermore, Several investments made during the early years of Carter Innovations originated from anonymous sources connected to this trust. Daniel immediately looked up. His face changed. Because he knew what that meant. Wait. His attorney whispered something to him. Daniel ignored him. Your Honor, the judge looked at him. Yes. Mr. Carter. Daniel swallowed. Are you saying those investments? He couldn't finish. He didn't have to. Everyone already understood. The money that saved Carter Innovations. The funding that allowed his company to survive. The investment that he always described as the miracle that changed my life. It came from me. I remembered that night clearly. The night Daniel almost lost everything. The company had 6 employees. The office was a small rented room. The bank had rejected his final loan request. He came home after midnight. He didn't even take off his jacket. He just sat on the floor. I failed. Those were the first words he said. I sat beside him. No. You didn't. Yes. I did. His voice broke. Everyone believed in me. And I let them down. I held his hand. Daniel. He looked at me. Do you still believe you can do this? He laughed bitterly. No investor does. I smiled. I'm not an investor. I paused. I'm your wife. That night, after he fell asleep, I contacted my family office. I approved the investment. Not because I wanted ownership. Not because I wanted recognition. Because I wanted to help the man I loved. The next morning, Daniel received the funding. He cried. He called it a miracle. He said, someone out there believed in me. I stood beside him. And I thought I did. Back in the courtroom, Daniel looked at me. Not with anger. Not with arrogance. With disbelief. You knew. His voice was barely a whisper. You knew I was about to lose everything. I didn't answer. Because yes. I knew. I knew every financial report. Every business decision. Every risk. But I also knew something else. Daniel never asked. Not once. He never asked where the money came from. He never asked why certain investors appeared at exactly the right moment. He simply accepted success. And eventually, he convinced himself he created it alone. Olivia suddenly spoke. But Daniel built the company. Everyone turned toward her. She looked nervous but continued. He worked every day. He sacrificed everything. I looked at her. For some reason, I didn't feel angry. I almost felt sorry. Because she believed the same story Daniel believed. The story he told the world. The story he told himself. The judge looked at her. Ms. Bennett. No one is denying Mr. Carter's work. A pause. But effort does not erase facts. The courtroom became silent again. Facts. That was the thing about truth. It didn't need emotion. It didn't need revenge. It simply existed. During the lunch break, I stepped outside the courthouse. The air was cold. New York was moving as usual. Cars. People. Noise. Life. Rachel stood beside me. You okay? I nodded. Yes. She looked surprised. Really? I smiled. For the first time in years. She looked at me carefully. Why? I looked back at the courthouse. Because I finally stopped waiting for Daniel to see me. Rachel didn't say anything. Because she understood. That was the hardest part. Not losing a marriage. Not facing betrayal. But realizing you had spent years hoping someone would notice the person you had always been. That evening, Daniel sent me a message. Only 4 words. I need to talk. I stared at it. Then another message appeared. Not about the money. I almost laughed. Because that was exactly what someone who cared about money would say. But before I could reply, a new message arrived. From an unknown number. 1 sentence. And it changed everything. Emily. Daniel has been hiding something from you too. I looked at the screen. My expression slowly changed. Because until that moment, I thought Daniel's biggest betrayal was choosing another woman. I was wrong. There was something else. Something he had been hiding for months. Something that could completely change the outcome of the divorce. I stared at the message on my phone. Emily. Daniel has been hiding something from you too. For several seconds. I didn't move. The city continued moving around me. Cars passed by. People walked along the sidewalk. A street musician played somewhere nearby. Everything looked normal. But my world had just shifted again. I read the message one more time. Then a third time. My first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was confusion. Because after everything that happened, I thought I already knew the worst side of Daniel Carter. I thought the biggest betrayal was Olivia. I thought it was the divorce papers. I thought it was watching him stand in court and try to convince everyone that I was just a woman who benefited from his success. But now someone was telling me there was more. Something I didn't know. Something Daniel had hidden. I called the number. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Emily. Rachel's voice pulled me back. I looked up. She was watching me carefully. You look like you just saw a ghost. I handed her the phone. She read the message. Her expression immediately changed. Do you know this number? No. Could be a trick. I know. Could be someone trying to create problems during the divorce. I know. Rachel looked at me. But you don't think it is? I stayed silent. Because deep down, I didn't. Something about the message felt real. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the confidence behind those words. Or maybe it was because some part of me had already suspected there were pieces of Daniel's life I no longer knew. That night, I went through old documents. Not because I wanted to investigate Daniel. Because I wanted to understand. For 10 years, I had avoided looking too closely into his business. Not because I couldn't. Because I respected him. That was the difference between us. When Daniel succeeded, I celebrated him. When I succeeded, I hid myself. I opened the financial reports from Carter Innovations. At first, everything looked normal. Revenue growth, new acquisitions, expansion plans. Then I noticed something. A company name. Bennett Strategic Holdings. I frowned. The name was familiar. Very familiar. Because Olivia Bennett's family owned a small investment group. But according to the records, they had become one of Carter Innovations' largest private partners 6 months ago. 6 months. The same time Daniel started changing. The same time he stopped coming home. The same time he started telling me he needed space. I leaned back. My fingers tightened around the papers. So this wasn't just about Olivia. The next morning, I asked Claire to investigate. She had worked for me for years. Quiet. Professional. Someone who knew when to speak and when not to. Find everything connected to Bennett Strategic Holdings. Claire nodded. Everything. Yes. She hesitated. Even if it involves Mr. Carter. I looked at her. Especially him. 3 hours later, Claire returned. She placed a folder on my desk. Emily, her expression was serious. I think you should see this yourself. I opened the folder. The first document was a partnership agreement. The second was a transfer record. The third was something that made my stomach tighten. A private agreement between Daniel Carter and Bennett Strategic Holdings. I read it slowly. Then again. Because I wanted to believe I misunderstood. But I didn't. Daniel had transferred a significant portion of Carter Innovations' future profit rights. Not to investors. Not to shareholders. To Bennett Strategic Holdings. Olivia's family. My hands became cold. Why? Claire looked at me. I don't know. I kept reading. There was one more page. A clause. A hidden clause. My eyes stopped. Because suddenly everything connected. Olivia wasn't just an affair. She wasn't just a woman Daniel was interested in. She was part of a plan. I remembered something Daniel said 3 months ago. We were sitting in our living room. He was looking at his phone. Emily. Maybe after the divorce. You should think about starting over somewhere else. I looked at him. What do you mean? He shrugged. I just think you'd be happier away from all this. All this. At the time, I thought he was talking about the pressure of his company. The media. The marriage. But now, I wondered. Was he trying to remove me before taking control? That afternoon, I met Daniel again. This time, I didn't tell him why. We sat across from each other in silence. He looked tired. More tired than before. Emily. His voice was low. I know you hate me. I shook my head. No. He looked surprised. No. I don't hate you. I placed the document on the table. I just don't recognize you anymore. His eyes moved to the paper. The moment he saw the company name, his expression changed. Only for a second. But I noticed. Where did you get this? There it was. Not denial. Not confusion. Fear. I leaned back. So it's real. Daniel didn't answer. Daniel. My voice became colder. Did you plan this from the beginning? His face tightened. No. Then explain. He looked away. For the first time since I knew him, Daniel Carter looked guilty. Not embarrassed. Not caught. Guilty. I was trying to protect the company. I almost laughed. Protect it. Yes. By giving control to Olivia's family. His eyes widened. So you know. I looked at him. That's your concern. Silence. A long silence. Then Daniel whispered, I made a mistake. Again. That phrase. The same phrase. But this time, it sounded different. Because now I knew. This wasn't a mistake made in one moment. It was a series of choices. Why? Daniel. My voice was quieter than I expected. Why did you do this? He looked at me. And for a moment, I saw the old Daniel. The man from the coffee shop. The man who once had nothing. The man who used to hold my hand and tell me I was his whole world. I was afraid. I frowned. Afraid of what? He swallowed. Losing everything. I stared at him. You mean losing the company? He didn't answer. And that answer told me everything. Because if he had said, no, losing you, maybe something inside me would have broken. Maybe I would have remembered why I loved him. But he didn't. I stood up. Daniel looked at me. Emily. Wait. I stopped. He looked desperate. Can we fix this? For a moment. I almost asked, fix what? The marriage. The trust. The years. But I already knew. Some things could be repaired. Some things could only be accepted. I looked at him. Daniel. Yes. The saddest thing is, I paused. You didn't lose me when you chose Olivia. His expression changed. You lost me the day you decided I was someone you could sacrifice. Then I walked away. That night, the court received another request from Daniel's legal team. A request that surprised everyone. Daniel wanted to delay the divorce proceedings. His reason? New evidence has emerged. But what nobody knew was that the new evidence wasn't something that helped him. It was something that could destroy him. Because while Daniel had spent weeks trying to prove I was nothing, he had forgotten one thing. The woman he was fighting against was the same woman who built the foundation beneath him. And now, that foundation was about to collapse. The morning after Daniel requested a delay in the divorce proceedings, my phone didn't stop ringing. News outlets, business magazines, former investors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was Emily Carter? I looked at the endless notifications on my phone and felt strangely detached. For years, I had avoided attention. I avoided interviews. I avoided cameras. I avoided having my name attached to anything. Because I believed a quiet life was the price of a happy marriage. But now, the world knew my name. And the person who exposed it wasn't me. It was my husband. The man who tried to prove I wasn't important. Emily. Rachel walked into my office carrying a stack of documents. Her expression was serious. That delay request from Daniel was approved. I looked up. Why? Because his legal team claims they found information related to your financial background. I frowned. My financial background. Rachel nodded. They're trying to argue that you concealed assets during the marriage. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. Daniel had spent years benefiting from the very thing he was now trying to use against me. He's accusing me of hiding money. Rachel sat down. I know how ridiculous it sounds. No. I looked at the documents. It actually makes sense. Rachel looked confused. What do you mean? I closed the folder. Daniel doesn't know how to fight me. He only knows how to fight the version of me he created in his head. That afternoon, Daniel's attorney sent over a formal statement. The claim was simple. During the marriage, Emily Carter allegedly concealed significant personal wealth and failed to disclose her true financial position. Therefore, Daniel's team argued he deserved compensation for being unaware of the financial imbalance. I read the statement twice. Then I placed it on the table. Rachel looked at me. He's trying to make himself the victim. Yes. And the irony. I smiled slightly. He's actually proving my point. She raised an eyebrow. How? Because even now, he still thinks the problem is money. I looked out the window. He still doesn't understand why I hid it. The truth was, I never planned to reveal my identity. Not even when Daniel became successful. Not even when people started calling him a genius. Not even when he began appearing on magazine covers. I wanted our marriage to stay simple. I wanted him to come home and talk about his day. I wanted him to complain about difficult clients. I wanted to cook dinner together. I wanted normal. Something my family wealth had never given me. Growing up as William Carter's daughter wasn't easy. People were always interested in my last name. My father's friends treated me differently. Business partners smiled too much. People wanted opportunities, connections, favors. Everyone knew the value of the Carter name. Everyone except Daniel. And that was why I loved him. At least, I thought I did. Because Daniel looked at me and saw Emily. Not Carter. Not billionaire heiress. Not the successor of a financial empire. Just me. Until he didn't. 6 months before the divorce, I attended one of Daniel's company events. It was supposed to be a celebration. Carter Innovations had just completed another major acquisition. Everyone was congratulating him. Employees surrounded him. Investors shook his hand. Cameras flashed. I stood in the corner, watching him. He looked happy, proud, successful. Then someone approached him. A businessman I had never met. Daniel. Congratulations. Thank you. The man looked at me. And who is this? Daniel smiled. For a moment, I expected him to say, my wife. Instead, he said, Emily. Just my name. Nothing else. The businessman nodded politely, then turned back to Daniel. That moment lasted only a few seconds. But I remembered it. Because that was when I realized something. Daniel no longer introduced me as part of his life. Only as someone standing nearby. 2 days later, I received a message from my family office. A reminder. The annual Carter Trust meeting. I ignored it. Like I had ignored it every year since marrying Daniel. My father once told me, Emily, money reveals people's intentions. I disagreed with him. I thought love was different. I thought Daniel was different. I wanted to prove my father wrong. But maybe, my father wasn't warning me about money. Maybe he was warning me about people. The following week, Daniel's legal team requested another hearing. This time, they brought evidence. The courtroom was packed again. But Daniel looked different. He wasn't there to attack me. Not anymore. He was there because he was desperate. The judge entered. Everyone stood. After reviewing the new documents, he looked toward Daniel's attorney. Are you claiming Mrs. Carter intentionally concealed these assets? Yes, Your Honor. The attorney spoke confidently. My client entered this marriage believing they were financial equals. He was unaware that Mrs. Carter possessed such significant resources. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Carter. Is this true? I stood. Yes. A murmur spread across the courtroom. Daniel looked surprised. His attorney smiled. Until I continued. I did not disclose my family's wealth. The attorney immediately said, exactly. But I wasn't finished. Because I never wanted to be loved because of it. The courtroom became quiet. I looked at Daniel. I wanted to know if my husband loved me when I had nothing to offer him. Daniel's face changed. Because for the first time, he understood the real question. This was never about money. It was about whether he ever saw me. The judge looked back at the documents. Then he noticed something. A signature. A familiar one. His expression changed. Wait. Everyone froze. The judge picked up another page. Who authorized this investment? Daniel's attorney looked confused. Investment. The judge nodded. This transfer that saved Carter Innovations from bankruptcy 10 years ago. Silence. Daniel slowly turned his head. Because he knew exactly what the judge was talking about. The investment that changed his entire life. The investment he always called his greatest breakthrough. The investment that allowed him to build his empire. The judge looked directly at me. Mrs. Carter, was this investment made by you? Daniel stopped breathing. The courtroom waited. And for the first time, the secret I had protected for 10 years was about to be revealed. The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the sound of papers moving. Every person inside that room was waiting for my answer. The judge looked at me. Daniel looked at me. Even his attorney, who had been so confident moments earlier, was now staring at me with uncertainty. Because everyone knew one thing. The investment the judge mentioned was not an ordinary investment. It was the turning point of Daniel Carter's entire career. The moment that transformed him from a struggling entrepreneur into one of the most successful CEOs in America. The moment he always described as the day someone believed in me when nobody else did. But he never knew who that person was. Until now. Mrs. Carter. The judge spoke again. Was this investment authorized by you? I looked down at the document in front of me. The signature. The date. The amount. Everything was exactly as I remembered. 10 years ago. Before Carter Innovations became famous. Before Daniel appeared on magazine covers. Before people called him a genius. Before he forgot the woman who stood beside him. I took a breath. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom exploded. Whispers spread everywhere. Reporters immediately began writing. Daniel's face lost all color. No, the word escaped his mouth. Almost like he refused to believe it. No. That's not possible. His attorney turned toward him. Mr. Carter. Daniel ignored him. He looked directly at me. You. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing to explain. The truth was already sitting in front of him. 10 years ago, Daniel's company was almost dead. Not struggling. Not facing difficulties. Dead. The bank had rejected him. His investors walked away. His employees were preparing to leave. He had spent months trying to convince people that his idea was worth believing in. Nobody listened. Nobody except me. I remembered the night he came home. It was raining. Hard. He opened the door quietly. Too quietly. I knew something was wrong. Daniel. He didn't answer. He just sat down on the couch. His suit was wet. His eyes were exhausted. After several minutes, he finally said, I lost everything. I sat beside him. No. You didn't. He looked at me. Emily. Stop trying to make me feel better. I'm serious. You don't understand. That sentence. At the time, I didn't realize how often I would hear it. You don't understand. He said it when talking about business. He said it when talking about investors. He said it when talking about his world. But I understood more than he knew. Because while Daniel was fighting to save his company, I was reading every report. Every financial projection. Every market analysis. Not because I wanted control. Because I believed in him. That night, after he fell asleep, I contacted my family office. I transferred the funds. Quietly. Anonymously. No name. No conditions. No ownership. I didn't want anything from him. I just wanted him to succeed. The next morning, Daniel received the investment. He called me from his office. His voice was shaking. Emily. Yes. Someone invested. I smiled. I know. How? I paused. Then laughed softly. Because I believe in you. He was silent for a moment. Then he said something I would never forget. You're the only person who never gave up on me. Back then, those words meant everything. Now, they hurt. Because years later, he became the person who gave up on me. Daniel. The judge's voice brought me back. Do you have a response? Daniel didn't answer. He looked like someone trying to put together a puzzle where every piece had changed. You knew. His voice was quiet. I looked at him. Yes. You knew the company was going to fail. Yes. You saved it. I nodded. Daniel laughed once. A broken, disbelieving laugh. You saved my company. The way he said it wasn't gratitude. It was shock. Like the idea was impossible. Like the woman he had lived with for 10 years could not possibly be the person who helped him become successful. Why didn't you tell me? The courtroom became silent. I looked at him. Because that question had been waiting for 10 years. Because I wanted you to believe in yourself. His eyebrows tightened. That doesn't make sense. It does. I looked around the courtroom. I didn't want you to think every achievement was because of my money. A pause. I wanted to know if you could succeed because of your own ability. Daniel swallowed. Anne. I looked at him. You did. For a second. Hope appeared in his eyes. Then I continued. But you forgot something. His expression froze. The person who believed in you before anyone else, I was still there. Olivia suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. Everyone looked at her. She looked nervous. But Daniel built the company. He worked every day. He sacrificed everything. The judge looked at her. No one is denying Mr. Carter's efforts. He placed the document down. But success built on hidden support is still built on support. Olivia became quiet. Because the truth was uncomfortable. Daniel worked hard. That was true. He deserved credit. But the story he told everyone was incomplete. He wasn't a man who built an empire alone. He was a man who was given a chance. And he forgot who gave it to him. During the break, Daniel followed me into the hallway. Emily. I kept walking. Wait. I stopped. But I didn't turn around. What? For several seconds. He said nothing. Then, I loved you. My hand tightened slightly. Those words. The words I had wanted to hear for months. Maybe years. But hearing them now felt different. I slowly turned. Did you? His face changed. Yes. Then why did you replace me? Silence. Why did you tell people I was just your wife? Why did you let Olivia sit in my place? Why did you come to court and ask for everything I built? Daniel looked away. Because every answer would expose him. Finally. He whispered, I didn't know. I nodded. That's the problem. I stepped closer. You never knew me. That afternoon. The court resumed. But before the judge could continue, another document arrived. This time, it wasn't from my side. It wasn't from Daniel's lawyers. It was from Carter Innovation's board of directors. The judge opened it. His expression immediately became serious. Interesting. Everyone looked up. The judge slowly read the first page. Then the second. Then he looked at Daniel. Mr. Carter. Daniel stood. Yes. The judge's voice became colder. It appears there are additional concerns regarding company ownership transfers. Daniel's face changed. What concerns? The judge placed the document down. Transfers made to Bennett Strategic Holdings. The courtroom went silent. Olivia froze. Because everyone understood. The story wasn't just about a hidden billionaire wife anymore. There was another secret. And this one belonged to Daniel. The judge looked toward me. Then toward Daniel. Before this court makes a final decision, we need to investigate whether Mr. Carter attempted to hide company assets before filing for divorce. Daniel's expression collapsed. For the first time, he wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to survive. And I realized something. The man who came into court trying to take everything from me had no idea that his own secrets were about to destroy him. The courtroom had changed. That was the only way I could describe it. A few hours earlier, Daniel Carter had walked into this room believing he was the person in control. He had his lawyers, his reputation, his company, his carefully prepared story. And I was supposed to be the woman standing in his way. But now, everyone was looking at him. Not me. The questions were no longer about my hidden wealth. They were about his hidden actions. The judge placed the documents on the desk. Mr. Carter. These records indicate that several major transfers occurred between Carter Innovations and Bennett Strategic Holdings shortly before your divorce filing. Daniel's attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, those were legitimate business transactions. The judge looked at him. Then I assume you can explain them. The attorney opened his mouth. But for the first time since this case began, he hesitated. That hesitation said more than any answer. Daniel turned toward Olivia. And I noticed something. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her with affection. He was looking at her with suspicion. Olivia. His voice was quiet. What exactly did your family receive? Her face changed. Daniel. Don't do this. Answer me. The entire courtroom watched. The woman who had competently sat beside him during the first hearing suddenly looked nervous. Your company needed investment support. Daniel stared at her. That wasn't my question. Olivia looked away. Because she knew. He was finally asking the questions he should have asked months ago. I watched silently. A strange feeling came over me. Not satisfaction. Not happiness. Just disappointment. Because the truth was, I had once hoped Daniel would fight for our marriage the same way he fought for his company. I hoped he would ask questions. I hoped he would search for answers. I hoped he would realize something was wrong before everything fell apart. But he never did. He trusted the wrong people. And doubted the only person who had always stood beside him. The judge continued reviewing the documents. According to these records, Bennett Strategic Holdings received future profit rights from several Carter Innovations projects. Daniel's attorney spoke quickly. Those agreements were made during normal business operations. The judge looked at him. Were they approved by the full board? Silence. A dangerous silence. Daniel slowly looked at his attorney. Were they? The attorney avoided his eyes. That was when Daniel understood. He wasn't just losing a divorce case. He was losing control of the empire he had spent years building. After the hearing ended, Daniel stopped me outside the courtroom. Emily. I kept walking. Please. I stopped. Not because I wanted to. Because I wanted to hear what he could possibly say. Daniel looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Did you know about Bennett Strategic? Yes. His expression changed. You knew. I discovered it recently. And you didn't tell me. I looked at him. That question almost felt ridiculous. Why would I? He froze. Because he knew the answer. The person he was questioning was the same person he had pushed away. The same person he had replaced. The same person he had tried to defeat. Emily, his voice became softer. I made mistakes. I looked at him. You keep saying that. Because it's true. No. Daniel. I shook my head. Mistakes happen when someone accidentally hurts another person. I stepped closer. What you did was different. His face tightened. You made decisions. You decided I wasn't important. You decided Olivia understood your world better. You decided I didn't deserve the truth. A pause. And now you're upset because you discovered I had my own. Daniel looked down. For a moment. I saw regret. Real regret. But regret was complicated. Sometimes people didn't regret hurting you. They regretted losing access to you. And I didn't know which one Daniel was feeling. Not anymore. That evening, Rachel came to my apartment. She carried another folder. I found something else. I looked at her. What? She opened the folder. Bennett Strategic Holdings wasn't only interested in Carter Innovations. I frowned. What else? They were interested in controlling your shares. I looked at the documents. My name was there. My personal shares. The shares Daniel didn't know existed. Rachel continued, according to these documents. If Daniel completed certain transfers after the divorce, Bennett Strategic would gain influence over the company. I read the page carefully. Then I understood. This was never just about money. It was about control. Daniel wasn't simply leaving me. He was trying to remove me from the picture. Completely. I sat back. For the first time, anger appeared. Not because he wanted wealth. Not because he loved someone else. But because he tried to erase my existence. The woman who supported him. The woman who saved him. The woman who gave him everything. He wanted to make me disappear. The next morning, the court announced an emergency hearing. The reason? A new discovery. A document signed by Daniel himself. A document proving that he had approved the transfer of company rights to Bennett Strategic Holdings. And there was one more thing. A signature beside his. A signature that shocked everyone. Because it belonged to Olivia. When Daniel saw the document, his face went pale. That's impossible. The judge looked at him. Mr. Carter. Are you saying this signature is not yours? Daniel stared at the page. He couldn't answer. Because it was his. His signature. His decision. His mistake. The judge leaned back. Then we have a serious issue. The courtroom became silent. Because while you were asking this court to award you your wife's assets, you were transferring company assets without proper disclosure. I looked at Daniel. And for the first time since this entire process began, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger. A man who had spent weeks trying to prove I was hiding something. Only to reveal that he was the one hiding everything. The judge turned to the final page. Then he said something that made Daniel completely freeze. Mr. Carter, there is one more matter. Daniel looked up. Yes. The judge looked at me. Then back at him. The court has verified Mrs. Carter's ownership records. A pause. And there is something you were never informed of. Daniel's expression changed. What? The judge spoke slowly. Your company's largest silent shareholder has always been Emily Carter. The courtroom exploded. Daniel stopped breathing. Because until that moment, he thought he had built an empire. Now he finally learned the truth. He had been living inside one. And the person holding the foundation beneath him was the wife he tried to leave behind. The courtroom erupted. For several seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The reporters in the back row looked at each other in disbelief. The lawyers whispered among themselves. Even the judge paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Your company's largest silent shareholder has always been Emily Carter. That sentence completely destroyed the story Daniel had spent years telling. The story where he was the genius who built everything alone. The story where he was the man who saved a failing company through determination and talent. The story where I was simply the wife standing beside him. But the truth was much more complicated. Daniel did build. He worked. He sacrificed. I would never deny that. But every empire has a foundation. And Daniel never knew who built his. Your Honor, Daniel finally spoke. But his voice was different. There was no confidence. No anger. No arrogance. Only confusion. I don't understand. The judge looked at him. I believe you do. Mr. Carter. No. Daniel shook his head. This can't be right. He looked at his attorney. Check it. His attorney looked uncomfortable. Mr. Carter, check it. For the first time, Daniel raised his voice. The courtroom became silent again. Because everyone saw it. The man who had controlled boardrooms. The man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals. The man who never showed weakness. Was breaking down. I watched him carefully. And strangely, I didn't feel victorious. I thought I would. 4 months. I imagined the moment Daniel would finally understand. I imagined him regretting everything. I imagined him realizing what he had lost. But now that it happened, all I felt was exhaustion. Because this wasn't the ending I wanted. I never wanted Daniel to discover my value because of my money. I wanted him to know my value before that. The judge continued. According to the records provided by Carter Capital Trust, Mrs. Carter has maintained a controlling financial interest in several companies connected to Carter Innovations. He turned a page. She was not simply a passive investor. She was one of the primary reasons this company survived its earliest years. Daniel stared at me. His eyes were filled with questions. Emily, I looked at him. He whispered, you owned part of my company. I corrected him gently. No. A pause. I owned part of the company we built. That word hit him. We. Because I wasn't trying to take credit away from him. I was reminding him. There was once a time when we were a team. After the hearing ended, Daniel refused to leave. Everyone slowly walked out. The reporters. The lawyers. The spectators. But he stayed. Standing in the empty courtroom. I gathered my documents. When I reached the door, I heard his voice. Emily. I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. Because a part of me was afraid. Afraid that if I looked back, I would see the man from 10 years ago. The man I loved. The man who made me believe forever was possible. But when I finally turned, I saw someone else. Someone lost. Why? That was all he asked. Why? I almost smiled. Because that was the question he should have asked years ago. Why what? Why did you hide all of this? I looked at him. Because I wanted a marriage. His eyebrows tightened. I gave you a marriage. No. My voice remained calm. You gave me a title. The words hurt him. I could see it. But they were true. You gave me the title of wife. But you stopped seeing me as a person. Daniel lowered his eyes. I never thought. He stopped. What? He swallowed. I never thought you were unhappy. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Because it proved everything. He didn't know. Not because I hid my feelings. Because he never looked. I tried to tell you. He looked up. When? I stared at him. Every time I waited for you to come home. Every time I asked about your day and you never asked about mine. Every time I stood beside you at events where everyone knew your name but nobody knew mine. Every time you said I didn't understand your world. I paused. You were right. Daniel looked surprised. I didn't understand your world. I took a breath. Because your world became one where I didn't exist. For a long time. Neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said something I didn't expect. Did you ever plan to tell me? I looked away. The answer was complicated. Yes. When? When I knew you loved Emily. He frowned. I did love you. I looked back at him. Did you? He froze. Because now he understood. Love wasn't just saying someone's name. Love wasn't just buying gifts. Love wasn't just remembering anniversaries. Love was seeing someone. Choosing them. Respecting them. And Daniel had forgotten how to do that. The next morning, the financial world changed. Carter Innovations released an official statement. Not about the divorce. Not about the rumors. About ownership. The statement was short, but powerful. Emily Carter has served as a strategic investor and shareholder of Carter Innovations since its founding period. Within hours, the entire business world knew. The quiet woman behind Daniel Carter had been there from the beginning. But the biggest shock wasn't the announcement. It was what happened afterward. Investors began questioning Daniel. Board members requested meetings. The media started investigating the transfers to Bennett Strategic Holdings. And suddenly, Daniel was no longer the man asking for my assets. He was the man explaining his own decisions. That afternoon, Olivia called me. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Emily. Her voice was different. Not confident. Not arrogant. Afraid. What do you want? There was a long silence. Then she said, I didn't know. I frowned. Didn't know what? That you were. She stopped. A billion-dollar woman. A powerful investor. The person who had been standing above everyone while they looked down on her. I waited. Finally. She whispered, I thought you were just lucky. I closed my eyes. Because that sentence told me everything. Not just about Olivia. About everyone who underestimated me. They didn't hate me because I had failed. They underestimated me because they never bothered to know me. Before hanging up, Olivia said one more thing. Emily, yes. Daniel really did love you. I was silent. Then I answered, maybe. A pause. But loving someone and knowing how to love them are two different things. I ended the call. That night, I received an urgent message from Rachel. The board has scheduled an emergency meeting. I read the next line. Then my expression changed. Daniel is being questioned about removing you from company ownership. I placed the phone down. Because I knew. The divorce was no longer just about a marriage ending. It had become a battle over the empire Daniel thought belonged to him. And tomorrow, everyone would finally learn the full truth. The next morning, I arrived at Carter Innovations headquarters for the first time in years. Not as Daniel Carter's wife. Not as the quiet woman standing behind the CEO. But as one of the company's original shareholders. The building looked exactly the same. The massive glass walls. The marble floors. The employees rushing between meetings. The giant screen in the lobby displaying Daniel's face. For years, I had walked through this building countless times. But no one ever looked twice at me. They saw Daniel Carter. They saw the CEO. They saw the man who built an empire. Today was different. As soon as I stepped inside, the entire lobby went quiet. People stopped talking. Phones lowered. Employees exchanged confused looks. Some recognized me immediately. Others only knew me from the news. The woman from the divorce case, that's Emily Carter. She's the shareholder. Whispers followed me. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. The elevator doors opened. Rachel was waiting on the executive floor. You ready? I looked through the glass wall toward Daniel's office. The office where he had spent years making decisions. The office where he celebrated his victories. The office where he once told me, "This company is my life." I nodded. Yes. Rachel studied my expression. You're not nervous. I smiled slightly. I was nervous when I walked into this building 10 years ago. She looked at me. 10 years ago. Yes. I looked at the office door. Because back then, I was wondering if Daniel would succeed. A pause. Today, I'm wondering if he can accept the truth. The boardroom was already full when I entered. Executives, board members, legal advisors. Everyone stood. Not because I demanded respect. Because they finally understood who I was. At the end of the table sat Daniel. He looked exhausted. His tie was slightly loose. His eyes were tired. This wasn't the man from magazine covers. This was the man who had spent days realizing his entire understanding of his own success was incomplete. Emily. He said my name quietly. I sat down across from him. Daniel. The chairman cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter. Thank you for attending. I nodded. Let's begin. The chairman opened the meeting. The board has reviewed the recent financial disclosures. He looked toward Daniel. Several concerns have been raised regarding the transfer agreements with Bennett Strategic Holdings. Daniel immediately responded. These were strategic partnerships. The chairman remained calm. Were they approved by the full board? Daniel paused. No. Were shareholders informed? Another pause. No. The room became silent. I watched Daniel. For years, I had watched him handle pressure. But this was different. Because he couldn't charm his way out of facts. Daniel. One board member spoke. Why did you authorize these agreements? Daniel looked frustrated. Because the company needed support. From Olivia Bennett's family. Yes. Why? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Then he said they had resources. The board member leaned forward. Or they had influence. Daniel's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. No. The chairman interrupted. This is about accountability. A pause. You attempted to remove your wife from the company while simultaneously transferring influence to another party. The room went quiet. Daniel looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes. Did I know? Yes. I did. But this time, I wasn't protecting him. After the meeting, Daniel followed me into the hallway. Emily. I stopped. What now? His expression changed. You're going to remove me. It wasn't a question. It was fear. I looked at him. Is that what you think? What else would you do? I studied him. That was the problem. Even now. Even after everything. Daniel still thought this was about punishment. About revenge. About me wanting him to suffer. But he still didn't understand. I don't want to destroy you. He looked surprised. Then what do you want? I answered honestly. I want the truth. Daniel laughed bitterly. The truth. Yes. The truth is I built this company. I looked at him. And I never said you didn't. He froze. That was the part he didn't expect. I wasn't taking his achievements away. I wasn't rewriting history. Daniel. You worked harder than anyone. You had the vision. You had the courage. You took the risks. I paused. But you also had someone who believed in you when nobody else did. His expression softened. And you forgot her. For a moment. Neither of us spoke. Then Daniel whispered, I was proud of myself. I nodded. I know. No. He shook his head. You don't understand. I almost smiled. Because those words again. You don't understand. But this time. He continued. I spent my entire life trying to prove I was worth something. His voice became quieter. When the company succeeded. When people respected me, I finally felt like I mattered. I looked at him. And then. He looked away. And then I started believing everyone who told me I deserved more. More. That single word explained everything. More money. More status. More power. More impressive people. And somewhere along the way, he convinced himself that I was the thing holding him back. That evening, the media released another shocking report. The headline appeared everywhere *** Carter Innovations CEO facing board investigation over hidden transfers. But that wasn't the only news. Another article followed. Emily Carter, the billionaire investor who built the empire from behind the scenes. For the first time, my story appeared. Not Daniel's version. Mine. That night, I received another unexpected visit. Daniel stood outside my apartment again. But this time, he wasn't angry. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't negotiating. He looked like someone who finally understood what he had lost. Emily. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. What happened? He looked down. I wanted to apologize. I waited. He took a breath. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. No. It doesn't. He nodded. I know. A long silence. Then he said, but I need you to know, I never thought I would lose you. I looked at him. That was your mistake. His eyes lifted. You thought I would always stay. I paused. You thought because I loved you, I would accept anything. Daniel's face changed. Because that was the truth. He had mistaken my patience for weakness. My kindness for dependence. My silence for surrender. Before he left, Daniel turned around. Emily. Yes. If I could go back, I interrupted. You can't. He looked hurt. But I continued. And that's okay. A pause. Because I don't want the old Daniel back. He froze. I want the woman I was before I became his wife. Then I closed the door. The next morning, Rachel called. Her voice was serious. Emily. What happened? The court received new evidence. I frowned. About Daniel. Yes. What kind? There was a pause. Then she said, the evidence proves Daniel wasn't just hiding company transfers. He was planning to completely remove you from Carter Innovations. I looked at the city outside my window. 4 weeks. Daniel had tried to convince everyone I was hiding something. Now the truth was finally coming out. He wasn't trying to protect his company. He was trying to erase me from it. And the final hearing was about to reveal everything. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse before everyone else. For the first time since this divorce began. I wasn't nervous. Not because I had won. Not because Daniel had lost. But because I finally stopped caring about proving myself to him. That was the strange thing about letting go. You didn't suddenly stop remembering the pain. You just stopped allowing someone else to decide your worth. The courthouse hallway was already crowded. Reporters stood outside. Cameras flashed. People whispered as I walked by. That's Emily Carter. The billionaire investor. The woman behind Carter Innovations. A few months ago, those words would have felt uncomfortable. I spent my entire life avoiding attention. But now, hearing them didn't make me proud. It only reminded me how much time I had wasted hiding. Not from the world. From myself. Rachel walked beside me. You know what's interesting? I looked at her. What? For 10 years. Daniel spent billions trying to make people believe he was unstoppable. She smiled slightly. And in less than a week, the truth came out because of a few documents. I looked ahead. Money can create an image. A pause. But it can't protect a lie forever. When we entered the courtroom, Daniel was already there. He sat alone. No Olivia beside him. No confident smile. No team of supporters surrounding him. Just Daniel. For a moment, I saw the man I met 10 years ago. The young entrepreneur who sat in a coffee shop with a broken laptop and a dream. Then I remembered the man who stood in this same room and asked a judge to take everything from me. And I realized something. People don't become different overnight. Success doesn't create a new person. It reveals the person who was already there. The judge entered. Everyone stood. After the formalities, He looked directly at Daniel's legal team. We will now review the additional evidence submitted regarding Carter Innovations ownership transfers. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, we maintain that all actions taken by Mr. Carter were business decisions intended to protect the company. The judge nodded. Then let's examine those decisions. A large screen behind him displayed several documents. The first, a transfer agreement. The second, a shareholder restructuring plan. The third, a private communication between Daniel and Bennett Strategic Holdings. The courtroom became quiet. Because everyone could see the dates. They could see the timeline. 6 months before Daniel filed for divorce. The exact period when his behavior changed. The exact period when Olivia became more involved in his life. The judge adjusted his glasses. According to these records, Mr. Carter began negotiations to transfer voting influence to Bennett Strategic Holdings while still legally married to Mrs. Carter. Daniel's attorney immediately responded. Your Honor, this was unrelated to the marriage. The judge looked at him. Was it? The attorney stopped. Because the answer was obvious. The transfer affected the company. The company affected our shared assets. And those assets were exactly what Daniel had come to court trying to claim. I looked at Daniel. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the documents. Almost like he was seeing them for the first time. But I knew that wasn't true. He knew. He had signed them. He had approved them. He had made those choices. The only difference was, he never expected anyone to question him. Mr. Carter. The judge spoke. Why did you not disclose these agreements during the initial asset review? Daniel slowly stood. He stopped. The entire courtroom waited. I believed they were necessary for the company's future. The judge nodded. Then why were they kept confidential? Silence. Daniel looked down. No answer. Because there wasn't one. The judge turned another page. And there is another matter. Everyone looked up. This court has reviewed the history of Carter Innovations' early funding. A pause. The original investment that allowed the company to survive, the judge looked toward me, was provided through Carter Capital Trust. Daniel closed his eyes. He already knew what was coming. The judge continued. Mrs. Emily Carter was not only the investor. She was the person who had authority over the trust. A murmur spread through the courtroom. She personally approved the investment. Daniel finally looked at me. And this time, there was no disbelief. Only regret. Because he remembered. He remembered the night he almost gave up. He remembered the apartment. The rain. The words he said. Asterisk I failed. Asterisk and he remembered me saying asterisk no. You didn't. Asterisk after the hearing. Daniel stopped me outside. Emily. I kept walking. Please. I stopped. Not because I wanted to hear excuses. Because I wanted to know if there was anything left of the man I once loved. What? Daniel took a deep breath. I remember that night. I said nothing. The night my company almost failed. I looked at him. I remember too. His eyes became red. I thought someone believed in me. A pause. I didn't know it was you. I looked away. You never asked. I know. No. Daniel. I faced him. You know now. His expression changed. But you didn't know then. Daniel stepped closer. I was so focused on proving myself. His voice shook. I wanted everyone to respect me. I wanted my father to see me as successful. I wanted the world to know I wasn't a failure. I listened quietly. Because for the first time in years, Daniel wasn't defending himself. He was explaining. I lost myself. I looked at him. Yes. You did. He swallowed. And I lost you. I didn't answer. Because that was true. But some losses couldn't be fixed by realizing them too late. That evening, the board of Carter Innovations released their decision. The announcement shocked the entire business world. Daniel Carter would remain CEO temporarily. But his authority would be restricted. All major decisions would require board approval. And the largest shareholder representative would be Emily Carter. The woman he tried to remove. The woman he thought was powerless. The woman he believed he could leave behind. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment. New York stretched beneath me. 4 years. I had watched Daniel chase the world. Now the world finally knew my name. My phone rang. Rachel. I answered. What's wrong? Her voice was serious. Emily, there is one more document. I frowned. One more. Yes. And this one, she paused. It was signed before your divorce was filed. I felt something change. What document? Rachel lowered her voice. A private agreement between Daniel and Olivia. My fingers tightened around the phone. What kind of agreement? Silence. Then she said, an agreement that could prove their relationship wasn't the only thing Daniel hid from you. I looked out at the city lights. Because suddenly, I realized the truth was still incomplete. Daniel Carter had already lost his company. He had already lost my trust. But now, the final secret he buried was about to come to light. For the first time in weeks, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. Not because I was worried about losing. But because I had finally realized something. The divorce was never as simple as Daniel leaving me for another woman. It wasn't just about Olivia. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about control. There was a deeper truth buried beneath everything. And somehow, I knew Daniel had spent months trying to make sure I never found it. The next morning, Rachel arrived at my apartment earlier than usual. She carried a black folder. No greeting. No small talk. That alone told me how serious it was. What is it? She placed the folder on the table. This is the agreement I mentioned. I opened it. The first page was simple. A partnership agreement. Between Daniel Carter and Olivia Bennett. At first glance, it looked like a normal business arrangement. But then I saw the date. My hand stopped. 6 months before Daniel filed for divorce. 6 months before he told me we had grown apart. 6 months before he started staying late at the office. 6 months before he told me he needed space. I continued reading. And slowly, everything became clear. The agreement wasn't about love. It wasn't a romantic promise. It was a financial arrangement. Olivia's family would provide strategic support to Carter Innovations. In exchange, Daniel would guarantee them future influence over certain company decisions. But there was something else. A hidden clause. A clause that made my stomach tighten. If Daniel successfully removed me from company ownership, Bennett Strategic Holdings would receive additional voting rights. I read the sentence again. Then again. Because I wanted to believe I was wrong. But I wasn't. Daniel didn't just want a divorce. He wanted me gone. Completely. Rachel watched my expression. Emily, I closed the folder. When did you find this? Yesterday. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I wanted to confirm everything first. I nodded. That was Rachel. She never acted emotionally. She always made sure the truth was strong enough to survive. What about Olivia? Rachel looked at the documents. She signed it too. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because suddenly everything made sense. The confidence. The attitude. The way Olivia looked at me during the first hearing. She wasn't just a woman who thought she had won. She believed she had already secured the future. I remembered the first time I met Olivia. It was at a company dinner. Daniel introduced her as his assistant. She's talented. That was what he said. Only that. At the time, I smiled. I trusted him. I even complimented her. You're lucky to have someone so capable helping you. Olivia smiled. Daniel is lucky too. I didn't think much about it. Not then. Looking back, I realized something. She wasn't talking about work. The emergency board meeting was scheduled that afternoon. This time, Olivia was there. But she looked completely different. No confidence. No arrogance. No perfect smile. She looked nervous. The kind of nervousness people had when they knew the truth was about to catch up with them. Daniel sat across from her. He barely looked at her. That hurt her. I could see it. Because she had expected him to protect her. But Daniel had spent his entire life protecting himself. When things became dangerous, he looked for someone to blame. The chairman placed the agreement on the table. Mr. Carter. Daniel looked up. Yes. Is this document authentic? The room became silent. Daniel stared at the paper. His face changed. Slowly. Painfully. Yes. The chairman nodded. And you signed it? Yes. Without informing the board. Daniel didn't answer. The chairman continued, without informing your wife. Silence. Daniel looked down. Yes. For some reason. That single word hurt more than the others. Not because I didn't know. I knew. The evidence was already there. But hearing him admit it, made everything real. 10 years. 10 years of marriage. And he was willing to make decisions that could destroy everything we built. Without telling me. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel turned toward Olivia. You knew. Everyone looked at her. She froze. Daniel, you knew Emily owned the company. Her silence was the answer. Daniel stood up. You knew. Olivia's expression changed. I found out later. When? She didn't answer. Olivia. His voice was cold. When? Finally. She whispered, before the divorce papers. The room went silent. Daniel stared at her. So you knew she wasn't just some ordinary wife? Olivia looked away. Yes. And you still encouraged me to remove her. Her eyes became defensive. Daniel. I was trying to protect our future. Our future. He laughed. A bitter laugh. You mean your family's control over my company? Olivia's face changed. That's not fair. No. Daniel looked at her. 4 months. You told me Emily was holding me back. He paused. You told me I deserved someone who understood my world. Olivia didn't speak. Because she knew. Those words were true. I watched them. And strangely, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel like I had one. Because seeing Daniel betrayed by Olivia didn't erase what he did to me. Someone else hurting him didn't heal my wounds. Only time could do that. After the meeting, Daniel found me outside. But this time, he didn't say my name immediately. He just stood there. Like he didn't know what words were left. Finally, I'm sorry. I looked at him. For what? His eyes lowered. For believing someone else over you. A pause. For thinking you were the person standing in my way. I said nothing. Because apologies were easy. Understanding was harder. Do you remember? Daniel continued. What you said when we first started dating. I frowned slightly. He smiled sadly. You said you didn't care how successful I became. You said you only cared whether I was still the same person when nobody was watching. I looked at him. I remember. Daniel nodded. I became exactly the person you warned me about. For the first time, he admitted it. Not because he was forced. Not because a judge told him. Because he finally saw himself. That evening, the final divorce hearing date was announced. The court would decide *ownership rights, *company control, *asset division, and Daniel's responsibility for undisclosed transfers. But before the hearing began, something happened. Something nobody expected. Daniel submitted a new statement. A personal statement. Not from his lawyers. Not from his company. From himself. The headline appeared the next morning *** Daniel Carter withdraws his claim for Emily Carter's assets. Everyone was shocked. But when I read the statement, I understood why. Because at the bottom, there was one sentence. A sentence that arrived 10 years too late. Emily Carter was never the person who took from me. She was the person who gave me everything. I stared at those words for a long time. Because regret had finally arrived. But unfortunately for Daniel, it arrived after everything was already gone. Daniel's statement went viral within hours. The same media outlets that had spent weeks analyzing our divorce suddenly changed their headlines. Before, they asked *** who is Emily Carter. Now they asked ** why did Daniel Carter hide the truth about his own marriage. The world had finally stopped looking at me as the mysterious billionaire wife. They started looking at the choices Daniel made. And that difference mattered. Because I never wanted people to know how much money I had. I wanted them to know how much I had sacrificed. The day after Daniel released his statement, I received an unexpected call. It was from one of the original employees of Carter Innovations. A man named Michael. He had been there from the beginning. Before the skyscraper. Before the investors. Before the success. Before everyone knew Daniel Carter's name. Emily. I smiled faintly when I heard his voice. Michael. It's been a long time. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. I wasn't sure if I should call. Why? Because I owe you an apology. I frowned. An apology. He sighed. When the company became successful, everyone believed Daniel built everything alone. I didn't speak. Even me. His voice became heavier. I should have known better. I looked out the window. The city stretched beneath me. Michael. You don't have to apologize. No. He interrupted. I do. A pause. Because I was there. I saw you working late with Daniel. I saw you reviewing business plans. I saw you solving problems nobody else knew existed. He stopped. But when people asked who saved the company, they only remembered Daniel. That conversation stayed with me. Because it reminded me of something. The hardest part wasn't that Daniel forgot. The hardest part was that everyone forgot. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But because I allowed myself to disappear. For years. I believed staying behind the scenes was proof of love. I thought supporting someone meant never needing recognition. But I was wrong. Love should never require you to erase yourself. A week later, the final divorce hearing arrived. This time, the courtroom felt different. Daniel arrived alone. No Olivia. No aggressive lawyers trying to control the narrative. Just him. He looked calmer. Older. Like the past few weeks had aged him years. When he sat across from me, our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us looked away. And I remembered something. There was a time when looking at him made me feel safe. Now, it only reminded me of everything we lost. The judge entered. Everyone stood. After reviewing the documents, he began. We will now address the final matters regarding asset division and company ownership. Daniel's attorney stood. But before he could speak, Daniel stopped him. Your Honor. Everyone looked surprised. Daniel stood. I would like to make a statement. The judge nodded. Proceed. Daniel took a deep breath. Then he looked at me. Not at my lawyers. Not at the judge. At me. Emily, my fingers tightened slightly. Because I knew this wasn't easy for him. For years, Daniel had built his identity around being right. Admitting he was wrong was probably harder than any business battle he had ever faced. I spent the last few weeks trying to understand how we ended up here. He paused. And I realized something. The courtroom was silent. I thought I lost control of my company. I thought I lost my reputation. I thought I lost everything because of what you hid from me. His voice became quieter. But the truth is, I lost everything because of what I failed to see. Daniel looked down. I spent years telling people I built Carter Innovations alone. A pause. But that wasn't true. I built it with someone who believed in me before anyone else did. His eyes lifted. Someone who never asked for credit. Someone who never used her wealth against me. Someone who gave me every opportunity to become the man I wanted to be. The courtroom was completely silent. Then he said, and I repaid her by making her feel invisible. I looked away. Not because I was moved. Because I was trying to understand what I felt. There was sadness. There was relief. But there wasn't love anymore. Not the kind I once had. The judge looked at Daniel. Mr. Carter. Are you withdrawing your claim against Mrs. Carter's personal assets? Daniel nodded. Yes. And your requests regarding the division of Carter Innovations shares. He took a breath. Yes. The judge looked surprised. You understand that by doing so, you are giving up significant financial claims. Daniel nodded. I understand. Then he looked at me. She earned them. Those words should have made me happy. But they didn't. Because I didn't need Daniel to admit I deserved what was mine. I needed him to have respected me when I was still beside him. After the hearing, we walked out of the courtroom separately. But before I reached the exit, Daniel called my name. Emily. I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. What? He was quiet. Then, do you hate me? I thought about it. A long time. No. His expression changed slightly. Then what do you feel? I looked at him. I feel like I spent 10 years loving someone who no longer existed. Daniel lowered his eyes. That answer hurt him more than anger would have. Because anger meant there was still something left. But sadness meant I had already moved on. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. Questions came from every direction. Emily. Are you taking over Carter Innovations? Daniel. Do you regret the divorce? Is the company still yours? Daniel stopped. For the first time, he didn't step in front of me. He stepped aside. And that small action said more than any apology. He finally understood. This was never his spotlight. It was mine. That evening, I received an invitation. Not from the media. Not from investors. From my father's old foundation. They wanted me to become the official chairwoman. For years, I had avoided taking that position. Because I was afraid people would only see my name. But now, I realized something. My name wasn't something I needed to hide. It was something I had earned. I accepted. And the next morning, the world received another announcement. Emily Carter appointed chairwoman of Carter Capital Foundation. The woman who had spent 10 years standing behind someone else, finally stepped forward. But just when I thought everything was finally over, Rachel called me. Her voice sounded uncertain. Emily. What happened? There's something you need to know. I frowned. What? She hesitated. It's about Daniel. I sighed. Rachel. If this is about another apology, no. She interrupted. This is different. A pause. Daniel didn't only withdraw his claims. He also submitted evidence against himself. I froze. What? He gave the court documents proving the full extent of the asset transfers. My expression changed. Why would he do that? Rachel was silent for a moment. Then she answered, because he wants to accept the consequences. I looked at the city outside. For the first time, Daniel wasn't trying to win. He was finally trying to take responsibility. But responsibility came with a price. And the final decision was about to determine whether Daniel Carter still had an empire left to save. When Rachel told me Daniel had submitted evidence against himself, I thought I had misunderstood. People like Daniel Carter didn't do things like that. Not because they were incapable of admitting mistakes, but because admitting mistakes meant accepting that the image they had built for years was not real. Daniel had spent his entire adult life proving one thing, that he was a winner. A man who never failed. A man who always found a way out. And now, he was choosing the one thing he had avoided his entire life. Responsibility. Are you sure? I asked Rachel. She nodded. I saw the documents myself. Why? Rachel looked at me. I think you already know. I was quiet. Because maybe I did. Daniel had spent weeks trying to protect his reputation. But somewhere along the way, he realized something. A reputation built on a lie wasn't worth protecting. The next morning, Carter Innovations released another announcement. This one was unexpected. Daniel Carter voluntarily resigned from his position as CEO pending the completion of an internal investigation. The business world exploded. The same man who had been called a genius. The same man who had appeared on countless magazine covers. The same man investors once believed could do no wrong, was stepping away from the company. I read the statement carefully. It was only a few paragraphs. But one sentence caught my attention. I accept full responsibility for the decisions I made. The company's success was never mine alone. And neither were the sacrifices behind it. I stared at the screen. 4 years. I wanted Daniel to understand those words. Not because I wanted him to suffer. Because I wanted him to see the truth. And now he finally did. Just too late. A few days later, I visited Carter Innovations. Not because I wanted to take Daniel's place. Not because I wanted to prove I could do better. I went because the employees deserved stability. Hundreds of people depended on that company. People who had nothing to do with our marriage. People who had worked hard because they believed in the future Daniel promised them. I walked into the boardroom. The same room where Daniel once announced his biggest achievements. The same room where he had told everyone, "We built this together." I remembered that sentence. Because once, it was true. The chairman stood. Emily. I nodded. Thank you for coming. The board members looked different now. Not because their attitude changed. Because they finally knew the full story. One of them spoke. Many employees are worried. I understand. They don't know what happens next. I looked around the room. This company was never one person. A pause. It was never just Daniel. Everyone became quiet. It was built by engineers, employees, investors, and everyone who believed in it. I looked at the documents in front of me. My job is not to erase Daniel's work. It is to protect what everyone built. After the meeting, I walked through the office. Employees greeted me. Some were nervous. Some were curious. Some simply smiled. A young employee stopped me. Ms. Carter. I turned. Yes. She looked embarrassed. I just wanted to say, she hesitated. Thank you. I smiled. For what? For giving the company a chance. I looked at her. You should thank yourself. She looked confused. Everyone here helped build this place. I paused. Never forget that. That evening, I received a message. From Daniel. I stared at his name for several seconds. The first few times he contacted me, my heart reacted before my mind did. Now, there was only calm. The message was simple. Can I see you one last time? I almost ignored it. But after thinking for a moment, I agreed. We met at the same coffee shop where we first met. 10 years ago. The place looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had changed. Daniel was already there. When he saw me, he stood. But this time, he didn't look like a CEO. He didn't look like a billionaire. He didn't look like the man who once believed he controlled everything. He looked like Daniel. The young man from the beginning. The one who dreamed. The one who loved me. The one I lost. I wasn't sure you would come. I sat down. I almost didn't. He nodded. I understand. That answer surprised me. Because old Daniel would have asked why. He would have defended himself. He would have explained. This Daniel just accepted it. I wanted to say thank you. I looked at him. For what? For everything. He smiled sadly. The company. The investment. The years you spent supporting me. I looked down. Daniel, no. He interrupted gently. Please let me finish. I stayed silent. I spent a long time thinking you hid your wealth because you didn't trust me. He looked at his coffee. But I finally realized, you hid it because you wanted to trust me. That sentence surprised me. Because it was the first time Daniel truly understood. I thought if I knew your money existed, I would become dependent on you. He laughed quietly. But the truth is, I became dependent on you without even knowing it. The silence between us was different this time. Not painful. Just honest. I'm sorry. Emily. I looked at him. I know. His eyes lifted. You know. Yes. A pause. But sorry doesn't change what happened. He nodded. I know. Again. That word. But this time, it didn't sound like an excuse. It sounded like acceptance. Do you ever regret meeting me? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it. Really thought about it. No. Daniel looked surprised. No. I shook my head. I regret losing myself. But I don't regret loving you. His eyes became red. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is admitting they mattered. Even if they are no longer part of your future. Before leaving, Daniel gave me something. An envelope. What is this? Open it later. I frowned. Daniel. It's not money. I know. It's not a contract. I looked at him. Then what? He smiled faintly. Something you deserve to have. That night, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not a legal document. Not a business proposal. Just words. Daniel wrote about everything he remembered. The night we met. The apartment. The company's first success. The moments he failed me. And at the end, there was one sentence. The greatest mistake of my life was believing I built an empire without realizing the person beside me was the reason it existed. I folded the letter. For the first time in months, I cried. Not because I wanted him back. Not because I regretted leaving. But because I was finally grieving the marriage I thought I had. A month later, my first public appearance as chairwoman of Carter Capital Foundation took place. The room was filled with investors, entrepreneurs, and journalists. Years ago, I would have stood behind Daniel. Today, I stood alone. And I wasn't afraid. A reporter asked, Ms. Carter, after everything that happened, what would you say was the biggest lesson? I looked at the crowd. Then I answered, never make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's world. The room became silent. I smiled. Because the right people will never ask you to disappear. That night, I returned home. My life was different. Not because I had more money. Not because the world knew my name. But because I finally knew myself. For 10 years, I had been Emily Carter, Daniel's wife. Now, I was simply Emily Carter. And that was enough. The world changed quickly after I stepped into the public eye. Faster than I expected. For years, I had believed revealing my identity would bring chaos. I imagined people treating me differently. I imagined every conversation becoming about money. I imagined losing the simple life I had tried so hard to protect. But what surprised me most was this: the world moved on. People talked. The headlines changed. New stories replaced old ones. And eventually, I realized something important. The only person who had been trapped by my secret was me. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I returned to Carter Capital's headquarters. Not Daniel's company. Not my husband's empire. Mine. The building was different from Carter Innovations. It was quieter. More traditional. My father built it decades ago. He believed businesses should not only create wealth, they should create opportunities. When I was young, I used to sit in his office and watch him work. I remember asking him, Dad, why do you work so hard if you already have everything? He smiled. Because money is not the goal. Emily. Then what is? He looked out the window. Building something that remains valuable after you're gone. At the time, I didn't understand. Now I did. My first major decision as chairwoman surprised everyone. I created the Carter Women's Entrepreneurship Fund. A $1 billion investment program designed to support female founders who struggled to receive funding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years ago, I had quietly helped Daniel because nobody believed in him. Now, I wanted to help people who were standing where he once stood. People with dreams. People with talent. People who simply needed someone to say, I believe in you. The launch event was held in Manhattan. Cameras surrounded the entrance. Reporters waited. This time, they weren't asking about my divorce. They weren't asking about Daniel. They were asking about my work. Ms. Carter, why did you create this fund? I looked at the crowd. For a moment. I thought about everything that happened. The courtroom. The betrayal. The years I spent hiding. Then I answered, because I know what it feels like when someone believes in you before the world does. The reporters wrote down my words. But they didn't know the full meaning behind them. Only I did. After the event, I received a message. From Daniel. I stared at his name. Months ago. Seeing his name on my phone would have changed my entire mood. Now. It was just a name. A memory. The message was short. Congratulations. I looked at it for a while. Then another message appeared. You looked happy. I smiled slightly. Because he was right. I was. For the first time in years, I truly was. I replied thank you. Nothing more. No anger. No coldness. No hidden meaning. Just thank you. A few minutes later. He responded. I'm glad. I put the phone down. That was enough. Some endings didn't need dramatic conversations. Some relationships simply reached the place where two people finally understood each other, and still chose different paths. A week later, I received another unexpected invitation. A business conference. The keynote speaker. Daniel Carter. I almost declined. Not because I hated seeing him. Because I didn't know if I was ready. Rachel noticed my hesitation. You don't have to avoid him forever. I know. Then why are you hesitating? I thought about it. Because I spent so long defining myself by what happened between us. Rachel smiled. And now? I looked at the invitation. Now I want to know if I can see him as just Daniel. I accepted. The conference was held in Chicago. Thousands of business leaders attended. When I arrived, Daniel was already on stage. He looked different. Not weaker. Not broken. Different. He wasn't talking about himself anymore. He was talking about rebuilding trust. About leadership. About mistakes. About learning. I listened quietly. Then he said something that surprised me. The biggest failure in my career wasn't a bad investment. It wasn't a business decision. It was believing success meant I didn't need the people who helped me get there. The room was silent. Daniel looked toward the audience. I spent years trying to prove I was self-made. A pause. But the truth is, no one is truly self-made. Every success story has people behind it. People who support you. People who believe in you. People you should never take for granted. I didn't know if he saw me. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But for the first time, his words weren't meant to impress anyone. They were simply honest. After the speech, we met backstage. Daniel smiled. Hi. I smiled back. Hi. A simple greeting. Something normal. Something we hadn't had in a long time. How have you been? Good. Really? I nodded. Really? He smiled. I'm glad. There was no sadness in his voice. No expectation. Just acceptance. We talked for a while. Not about the divorce. Not about the company. Not about money. We talked about life. The way we used to. And strangely, it felt peaceful. Before leaving, Daniel said, Emily. Yes. I used to think losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I waited. He continued, but now I think the worst thing was becoming someone who could lose you. I looked at him. Because that was the most honest thing he had ever said. On the flight home, I looked out the window. The clouds stretched endlessly below me. 4 years. I thought my greatest achievement was protecting my marriage. I thought being loved by Daniel proved I mattered. But I was wrong. My worth existed before him. And it remained after him. 6 months later, Carter Capital announced its largest investment project. A new technology innovation center. The media called it the next billion-dollar breakthrough. During the opening ceremony, I stood on stage. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. But this time, I didn't look for Daniel. I didn't look for anyone's approval. I simply looked ahead. Because I finally understood the woman who spent years hiding her light was never afraid of being seen. She was afraid that if people saw everything, they would stop loving her. But the truth was simpler. The right people never needed a reason to stay. And the wrong people would leave no matter how much you gave them. That evening, I returned home. On my desk was the old photo from my wedding day. I picked it up. I looked at the younger version of myself. The woman who believed love meant sacrifice. I smiled softly. Because I wanted to tell her something. You were not foolish for loving. You were brave. You just forgot to love yourself too. I placed the photo back. Then I turned off the lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities. But for the first time in 10 years, my future belonged completely to me. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my life looked completely different. Not because I had become richer. Not because my name appeared in newspapers. Not because the world finally knew who Emily Carter was. Those things had never been the reason I wanted success. The biggest change was much simpler. I woke up every morning knowing I was living my own life. Not Daniel Carter's wife. Not the woman standing behind a famous CEO. Not the person people underestimated. Just Emily. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The Carter Capital Foundation headquarters was located in downtown Manhattan. The building was older than Carter Innovations. It didn't have the same modern design. It didn't have giant screens displaying achievements. My father had intentionally designed it that way. He once told me, buildings should not remind people how powerful you are. They should remind people what you can do for others. I finally understood what he meant. Power wasn't about being above people. It was about having the ability to help them rise. The first year after taking over the foundation was the busiest year of my life. But strangely, it was also the happiest. I met young entrepreneurs, scientists, engineers, people who had brilliant ideas but couldn't find anyone willing to believe in them. Every time I sat across from them, I remembered Daniel, the young man in the coffee shop, the man with a dream nobody believed in, the man who only needed one person to say, "Keep going." And that was exactly what I wanted to give others. A chance. One afternoon, I received an invitation. A charity gala. Hosted by one of New York's largest business organizations. At first, I wasn't interested. I had attended countless events with Daniel. Standing beside him, smiling for cameras, pretending everything was perfect. But this invitation was different. My name was on it. Not as Daniel Carter's wife. Not as someone's guest. As the keynote speaker. I accepted. The night of the gala, I stood backstage. The crowd outside was enormous. Executives, investors, media representatives, people who once knew me only because of Daniel. Rachel adjusted her notes. Nervous. I smiled. No. She looked surprised. You used to hate public speaking. I used to hate being watched. I looked toward the stage. Now I understand the difference. When my name was announced, the entire room applauded. I walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The cameras were pointed at me. Years ago, that would have made me uncomfortable. Tonight, I felt calm. Because I wasn't there to prove anything. I was there to share something. Everyone here knows success stories. I looked at the audience. We celebrate the person who reaches the top. We celebrate the founder, the CEO, the leader. A pause. But we rarely talk about the people who helped them get there. The room became quiet. Sometimes, the person standing quietly beside someone else is the reason they were able to move forward. I thought about Daniel. About the beginning. About the ending. But support should never mean disappearing. Love should never require you to become smaller. Because the people who truly value you will never ask you to hide. The applause lasted longer than I expected. When I stepped off the stage, Rachel smiled. That was not the Emily Carter I knew 10 years ago. I laughed. No. I looked back at the stage. She was always there. She was just waiting to come back. After the gala ended, I stepped outside. The night air was cold. New York was glowing. And then I saw him, Daniel, standing near the entrance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It had been almost a year since the divorce. A year since the courtroom. A year since everything changed. Congratulations. He smiled. Your speech was incredible. Thank you. Simple words. No complicated emotions. No unfinished arguments. Just two people who once loved each other. Daniel looked different. Not because he had lost money. Not because he had lost power. Because he had finally stopped pretending. I heard about the foundation. I nodded. It's doing well. I'm happy for you. I looked at him. And you? He smiled faintly. I'm learning. Learning what? He looked at the city. That success isn't about proving everyone wrong. A pause. It's about becoming someone you can respect. I was quiet. Because that was something Daniel would never have said a year ago. I owe you an apology. I looked at him. Daniel, no. He shook his head. Let me say it. I stayed silent. I spent years believing you were lucky to have me. His voice was low. But the truth was, I was lucky you chose me. He took a breath. And I wasted that. For a moment, I remembered everything. The coffee shop, the apartment, the wedding, the company, the betrayal, the courtroom. All of it. A lifetime of memories with one person. But memories were not promises. And love from the past did not always belong in the future. I hope you find happiness. Daniel looked at me. You already have. I smiled slightly. Yes. He nodded. I know. And that was the difference. The old Daniel would have tried to change my mind. The old Daniel would have fought to win. This Daniel finally understood that some things weren't meant to be won. Before leaving, he said, Emily. I turned. Yes. Thank you. I looked at him. For what? For showing me what I lost. I smiled softly. No. Daniel. A pause. I showed you what you had. The loss was your choice. I walked away. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just peacefully. Because the woman who entered that courtroom months ago was someone desperate to be understood. The woman leaving that gala needed nothing from anyone. Years later, people would still talk about the famous divorce case, the billionaire wife, the CEO husband, the courtroom revelation, the shocking billion-dollar secret. But that was never the real story. The real story was about a woman who spent years hiding her strength because she thought love required sacrifice. Until she finally learned her value was never created by her wealth. Her worth was never decided by someone else's opinion. And she was never just someone's wife. She was always Emily Carter.